Good day, everybody. Today we're going to rock and roll on what I call bulletproof boundaries. You have to really keep boundaries. And I love the statement, which I kind of heard her kind of allude to, is if you haven't said yes to something, then when somebody asks you for something, you say yes to that. Well, then you've said no to something you wanted to say yes to, sometimes without even knowing it. Like that window of time you wanted next week, it's gone because all of a sudden somebody asked for time. Oh yeah, I got that time. And you had no boundary. So when you show up and go, I really love to work on this thing right now, but I don't want to be a bad friend or a bad human and say no, I got to do it. I got to go to this party. I got to go write this thing. I got to make this. And I really love to do my thing. All you had to do is set up boundaries. And when you want to create something, build something, let's say in the focus of maybe you want to get a promotion. So you want to do great in this next project. Maybe you want to build an amazing business, but you still have a job that you're doing. Or maybe you have kids. Maybe you have a husband. Maybe you have things you're traveling to do, whatever it might be. There's a lot of people that have this mentality. I'd love to, by a show of hands in the comments, have you ever in your head thought to yourself, I'd love to do that, but there's just not enough time? Anybody ever said it before? There's just not enough time. And I would like, perfect. We got yes daily. And so I had this. And what I did is I found that when we speak things into existence, we make them a reality. Genuinely, if I say I don't have enough time, guess what? I will not have enough time. But then I started flipping the switch for me about like 7-8 years ago. I was like, I know the time exists because I, for some reason, know about all the TV shows, all the movies going on, the pop culture. So obviously there's time, right? But I'm not using it or allocating it properly. And then I also found that when I'm trying to do things, the biggest issue was distractions or other people kind of taking my time, we'll call it. And I wanted to find a way to build the business and build my relationship and build my health and be a great father without having that thought of there's too much time. Because currently in my life, I have a wife that just finished her freshman year of college sports, although she has her master's degree in special education. At 38, she decided to running track, and she now holds her school's record for the Open 400. In NorCal, it's junior college realm. She was first to Open 4, the 1, second in the 2, and first in the 4x4. She's a beast. At the same time, I have a kid who just graduated high school, going off to college. So we're working on getting him all dialed in. I have twins that are 12 and 13, doing track, doing different stuff for football. I train 5 days a week. I have a full business with 12 different team members. And I also, at a weird place, I'm like, I want to get my pilot's license. Someone start trying to fly. People go, Ed, how in the world do you live your life and not fall apart? And I go, well, I got amazing boundaries. And today we're going to figure out what they are. And this is quite literally how I run my entire life. So here's the thing. What goes wrong? The reason is because you have no, you set no, and you keep no boundaries, people. And this is a truth. And here's what I've realized when it comes to boundaries. I may be wrong, but I find that most boundaries are broken by other humans. Whether it's my wife wants to walk into the middle of me doing something, or my phone goes off, or an email pops in, or Brendan alluded to, other people have these things pop in. And so for me, knowing that I'm built as a human and you are as well, we're tribal based people. Like we're tribal based in a sense of like, I want to be part of the tribe. I don't want to be cast out. I don't want to be separate from. I want to be part. I want to be accepted. I want to be desired. And our desire to be desired sometimes makes us diminish our desires. Repeat this. Our desire to be desired sometimes makes us diminish our own desires. So I may desire to create this thing, do this thing, but when you ask, and I want to be desired by you, I'm dropping everything and doing it. And then what happens is I get a little bit less personal pride for myself. I feel like I let myself down, and then I will show up more for other people than I will for myself. It's not a great place to be, because if you can't show up for yourself, you will not have enough to show up for other people. And a lot of it happens because we don't have boundaries in place. And I've been there in my own life. I had issues where like I had a marriage that fell apart. If you guys know, in the past, my whole marriage, I was divorced. I was living in a 500 square foot studio apartment. Like I had not much going on. Because when I was in my marriage, I didn't have boundaries with time. I didn't have boundaries with focus. I didn't have boundaries with parenting. I had none of that. I was all on work, and nothing could break that boundary. And I had no boundary of how to make sure the marriage was taken care of. So everything fell apart. I was broke at one point. I don't know if you've ever been in this place where like I had no boundaries on what I would and would not spend, or how I wouldn't make financial decisions. I just did whatever felt right in the moment. You ever done that before? Not a smart way to handle money. On top of that, like I at a certain point was unhealthy. I had no boundaries over what went in my mouth when I would work out. Like I owned a gym, was in the worst shape of my life at one point. The weirdest kind of oxymoron, but that's how I was. At the same time, I had this marriage that was falling apart because I didn't keep a boundary of what my love needed, what my marriage needed. And I didn't have certain things to make sure other stuff were kept out, like work being kept out. And on top of that, when it came to work, I wasn't doing a good job of staying focused at work. Here's a cycle that sucks for a lot of people. And let me know in the chat if you had this happen, where you have this passionate desire to grow yourself, to do this thing. And so it almost takes over this kind of infatuating love affair with you building this, creating this, working on this. And what happens is When you don't get that thing done, you don't get work done, you come home and work comes home with you. Anybody had it happen? So work comes home with you, and now you're in this relationship and you come home, but you're still at work mentally, but presently here. And they read it on your face. They see it in your hyper texting fingers. Like they just watch it. And what happens is you find that you get in arguments. Hey, can you put your phone down? Can you just turn it off for 5 minutes? Can you listen to me for 30 seconds? Like those conversations happen. And they're little drips. They're little statements of people saying, hey, I need you to keep the boundary at work. Here's why. If I take work home and I go home and I fight a lot, well, when I go back to work, I have the energy of a negative home experience. And so when I'm at work at, this area, I'm still thinking about the guilt I have from home. So my work is not focused. I'm distracted. I can't stay in flow. And then I, again, don't get work home and I bring it home and I'm keeping up. It's frantic. But if you could simply learn to keep a boundary at work, I promise it'll affect your relationship positively. It's how I live my life. And I'm going to tell you how I do it through 5 steps. So how do we do this? So here's what I look at the very first step. The first one's what I call foundation, laying the bricks. Most of us go, I want to stay disciplined. I want to have these boundaries, but none of us lay the foundation of what we're trying to create as the base for the boundary. Think about this. If you're going to put up a castle wall, a boundary, you probably want to know where you're going to build the castle, right? Be a good idea. But most of us, we just kind of like, I'm not going to do this, not going to do that, but we don't really wholly know what we're trying to do it for. And so what I recommend as the first thing is you've got to set this bigger picture of, like, I call it the vivid vision. What is the vision I can taste, touch, smell, touch, like physically, to where I know what I'm about to start building towards? What am I going to build for? So what I mean by this is you should have a foundational base of, I'm doing this so that my marriage looks like this. My business looks like this. My parenting looks like this. My body looks like this, right? There's got to be a future pace of what I'm laying this foundation for, because if I don't do this, when I set the boundary, I will question whether or not I want to keep the boundary for this thing. If you don't know what that is, it'll vary. It's like I've said in the past, some people have an idea of the city, but not the address. I know the area vicinity, right? But I don't know the pinpoint where the Google Maps can pull up the Google Life view, right? The street view. Like, what's the street view for the dream? Because if I don't know what it is in the different areas, it's very hard to set boundaries around it, because it's arbitrary, it's floaty, and it can change at different times. And if it can change, it is not a barrier. It's not a boundary. So the idea is the first part of foundation is, and you may write this down, in your health, in your career, which would be your wealth, in your relationships, parenting, if you have kids, or your actual intimate relationship, your friendships, what do those look like? What do you want them to look like? Quite literally, like, do I want to spend a certain amount of hours with my wife each day or each week, or with my husband each day and each week? Do I want to have certain time with my kids? We do dad days and kid days, pretty much date days for the wife, dad days for my kids. And there's certain allocation of time there. I've got to know what these things are, because if I don't, again, I can't create a boundary around them, right? And then on top of that, health. How often are you going to work out? Is it going to be an hour? Is it going to be once a week, twice a week, 3 days a week? What does that look like? It could be as simple as just saying, how much time do I want to allocate towards it? That's it. Simple. Part 2, which is going to be step number 2, is we're going to go and say, hey, what are the parameters? What is the boundary of what is okay and not okay? Now, when I say what's okay and not okay, here's what I mean by that. Say, for example, I'm going to have a set rule or set area or boundary for my marriage. If I know my marriage time, which I've allocated specifically for my wife, and we're going to do certain things, that parameter, that boundary around that should say, look, I do not take phone calls. It goes on do not disturb unless it's the kids. And I set this in my phone, right? If it's going to be something with my wife, I'm going to make sure that I'm not talking about work. Like some of our boundaries, we don't talk about work in our relationship time, right? It's just our separate things. You have to actually write down and structure what are the things that are going to be allowed in and kept out. So what do we talk about in here? We talk about the kids, we talk about the future, we talk about our health, we talk about dreams, right? That's what stays in this boundary. Anything outside of that, not part of the conversation, not par for the course. Friends can't come. I don't take phone calls. It's just us sitting and talking. If not, you damage the boundary and something gets in that's not supposed to get in and messes it up.
This can be your day for personal growth. This can be that day you committed to and you remember and you go, that was the day I got myself a community. I got better coaches. I committed to making my life the absolute best that I could. This is that day. Make today your growth day. Click the button on this page and sign up right now.